And welcome back. We have done now up to this point a lot of work with pixel art in small individualized components. But now let's go ahead and look at this in a larger scale. So in front of us we have here a pixel art map. And we can see different things, different props and icons and stuff like that that we have done up to this point. So for example, in here, there are trees that are repeated. You can see we have the skinnier trees, the fatter trees, rocks, maybe some flowers. Even the shoreline are all different things that have been done with pixel art. Now, as you can tell, there is a lot of repetition that goes on here, which means this is not painted with each tree individually, even though, yes, that would be much more organic. When we are looking at this from a development standpoint, if you were to have this, for example, in a video game, you don't necessarily want to paint every single asset, every single frame, because it's going to be quite time consuming and costly. So instead, we can reuse things like those props, like when we made our crate, for example, or that diamond that we had done previously, to go ahead and save us some time and energy. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own pixel art map. So let's first go ahead and get started by setting this up, and let's go to File, New. Now, the thing is here, when we are looking at our pixel art, most pixel art in games and different apps and stuff like that is about 32 by 32. So we're going to go ahead and assume to do 10 frames, because if we just want something simple, you can do more or less, but we're going to choose to do 10 frames here across and down. So we're going to make a total width of 320 and a total height of 320. And let's just go ahead and leave this transparent. Go ahead and create. Control 0 to zoom in a little bit here. And we want to go ahead and, of course, put on our guides here. So let's go ahead and view. Let's go to guides and do a new guide layout. And I went ahead and put in here previously, I was playing around with this and did 10 by 10. And we have, of course, our width 32 by 32. And even if I remove that width out of there, it's not going to affect anything. Again, this is more if you have different dimensions. So for example, I had 32 by 40 or 40 by 32, something like that. This is when that's going to play into factoring. But because we're using shapes that are 32 by 32 all around, we can just do 10 by 10. Again, you can choose what color you want to use. Make sure I clear any existing guides, which I don't have right now. And let's go ahead and click OK. And so now, of course, we've set up our canvas. And I'm actually going to go ahead and start up here in this upper left corner to go ahead and start making my artwork. So I'm going to hold down the space bar, and you can see I have a little grab hand. I'm just going to go ahead and move this over here to this corner. And using my mouse wheel, let's go ahead and move to the zoom, actually, and just use the zoom tool. I'm just going to go ahead and click this to zoom in just a little bit here. That looks great. And the first thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to use my rectangular selection tool here. All right, so with my rectangular selection tool, I'm going to go ahead and select these first 9 squares here. And you can see I have a nice, good, sharp snap there because it was 96 by 96. And we're going to go ahead and start by making, let's say, an island. Well, that means the very first thing I'm going to do, if I have an island or some kind of body on water, I need the watercolor. So I'm going to go ahead and find a blue. And I don't actually want to do too dark of a blue, because remember, dark blue indicates typically deep water. So I'm actually going to go take this down a little bit in some of my blues and go find something that's not super saturated, but also is not super dark. And then you can play around to find the blue you think works best for you. I think this will be a pretty good color to start here. And let's go ahead and grab our paint bucket tool and go ahead and fill that zone in. And just like that, I've gone ahead and got that started. Now let's go ahead and put some land in here. So again, I'm using my rectangular marquee selection tool. Let's deselect first our current selection, so Control D. And let's make a new layer here. And this, of course, will be our land. And what I'm going to do is I'm, again, holding down the Shift key so I can have a rectangular shape. Let's go ahead and draw this in here. Try and get the best we can. And, of course, one of the things you'll notice is when we do this, if we start moving this around, we can see this little line kind of popping up here in the middle of our graph. It's just kind of showing us exactly where this is in order to kind of get this nice and centered. And this looks like it's pretty close. If it's off a little bit, that's okay as well, because again, we can adjust things later as we work. Now let's go ahead and fill this in. Let's go ahead and grab a brownish tone for our land. So I'm going to go down to the more of a brown hue here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. Try to find that brown that I think is going to work pretty good for my land. And again, using my paint bucket tool, let's go ahead and fill that in. And again, this is just a good selection here. Now I might say, well, how am I doing with pixels? How are things doing? So I might say, this doesn't look like it's. And so I might have to say, I want this to be maybe a little bit more. We can, of course, adjust this. For example, I might say this is a different pixel here. I can just grab my pencil tool real quick, holding down the pencil tool and add another line there. It's all pretty easy to fix to try and make this look good. Or for example, I might say this has a little bit less pixels here. So I might go ahead and add another line there. All right. Now we have a nice fundamental shape to start here. But we actually want to go ahead and round out the corners here in our island. And there's going to be a couple tricks we're going to do to make this happen. So I'm going to go to my eraser tool right now. And I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here. So grab my zoom tool and kind of go to this corner. Use my hand there, move that up, perfect. And with my eraser tool, I'm going to go ahead and just erase off this corner here a little bit. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be kind of rough. We're kind of going for something a little more organic in its look, and that looks perfectly fine. So using my zoom tool again, I'm holding down the Alt key now to bring that back. Grab my hand tool with the space bar, and let's switch to our rectangular marquee tool, and let's go ahead and just select this corner here. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and select this corner, and what I want to do is effectively have this be copied in other zones. So this is going to replace these other corners here. Now, I could copy and paste, but actually there's a way we're going to do this. We're actually going to first, let me deselect this and go ahead and remove these corners by using the delete key, because we actually want to end up overwriting what is here with a different corner. So delete those out real quick, come back to this corner, and let's hold down the Alt key. Make sure we're on our move tool first. And you'll see we have kind of that double-headed arrow. That will allow us to make a copy of this as we move it. Put that into place, and let's go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And you can see now we have a nice mirrored piece here that mirrors here. And we're going to go ahead and do that again for our other corners. Only now I'm going to flip this one vertical and repeat one more time. And let's go ahead and flip horizontal. There. We now have the start to our island, so let's go ahead and Control D. But of course, this is not going to give us enough dimension to kind of get started. So if I wanted to make a concave surface, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and move ourselves on over here. So I'm using the spacebar to kind of drag on over. And let's go ahead and use our key selection tool to go ahead and grab these 4 squares right here. So 64 by 64. And we're going to go ahead and fill this in now with our brown actually. And what we want to do is fill these, kind of have a center zone right in here for our water to kind of fill in. So Control D to deselect. And I'm just going to go ahead and holding down the Shift key. Let's see if we can try to, actually hold down the Shift key. We want to get a square that's perfect here. So it looks like I got about 13 by 13 as a square. And now I can move that selection here into my shape area. And I'm going to go ahead and now use my eyedropper tool to grab the blue that I had done previously. And let's go ahead and fill that in with blue. And I'm going to now go ahead and switch back to the brown. And I'm actually now going to use my pencil tool to actually give this back a little bit of concaveness here. So I'm actually going to kind of round that out a little bit. And now it's going to be pretty much a repetition of what we had done before. So let's go ahead and go to our move tool. Holding down the Alt key, we're going to start making copies here. And then we can, of course, go ahead and flip these with our transformation option. All right, and just like that, we now have Control D. We have the start of our shape here. But let's do one more thing here. We want to give a little bit more definition to these 2 zones here before we really start doing anything too crazy. The first of which is adding maybe some grass over this zone to kind of help pop. So let's go ahead and make some grass here by using our magic wand tool. Now, if you don't have this, it's the same place our quick selection tool is. We just right click here, go to magic wand. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this zone here. And if I want to grab this other zone, I can do that as well, because I'm going to want to go ahead and actually have both of these here together. So I'm going to hold the Shift key so I can grab both of them. And what I'm going to do is create a new layer. And now that these zones are both selected, I'm just going to go ahead and grab my fill bucket tool and find myself a nice green to kind of represent some of that grass here. And so I'm going to go find a green that I think looks really good with this zone. That looks okay, not too saturated. And we're just going to go ahead and fill that in. And you can see we have the start to our... All right, we want to go ahead and offset this just a little bit here so we can start seeing some of those areas underneath. And so if I were to go ahead and just use my arrow keys, I can just tap up a little bit here. I can go ahead and move these. Now notice my shape did not move because I'm not on my move tool here. So I want to make sure I'm on my move tool here. And so now if I tab my arrow keys up just a little bit, I can bring up just a little bit of surface here. And so you can see how things are starting to come out here with the different layers, and we can really start to add and show some texture here. I'm just going to do, for my purposes right now, let's just go ahead and do 3 or 4 pixels. That looks okay. And now we actually want to shrink these areas down just a little bit here. So let's use our key selection tool. I'm going to deselect here first. And let's use our magic wand tool and grab just this one zone here. And let's do edit and do transform. And we can do several different options here. We can, of course, have different options to like scale, rotate, skew, or you can just do a free transform with Control T. And what I want to do is actually just kind of bring this side in just a little bit on both sides. Just 1 pixel sounds pretty good, just to kind of give a little bit of definition here to the side of this shape. And then we want to Control D to deselect this. So okay, hit Enter here to apply, or hit the check mark. Control D. And so now that this is deselected, I can go ahead and move on to this zone here. So I'm going to go ahead and select here and go ahead and get ready to... Now the big thing is here, if I just go ahead and try to start moving this as is, I could run into issues where it bleeds over. So let's just see this. Let's go ahead and transform this. Actually, I'm just going to use Control T and grab my transformation tools here. And if I try bringing this in just a little bit, you can see how we start losing some of that map. Or if I try bringing this up, or I try bringing it out, we can, of course, may have some different pieces being affected here. So I don't want this whole thing to be selected here. So I'm just going to cancel that transformation here. And I actually want to bring this in just a little bit here. So I'm just going to deselect real quick. And I'm just going to make a selection here of this zone right now. And Control T of this zone. And if I go ahead and pull now on this inside zone like this, now you can see we're not affecting the overall shape, but I can still get those edges to show up that I maybe wanted before. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull the edges about 1 pixel on both sides just to add a little bit more curvature here. If I do 2 pixels, you can see it really starts popping up here. And we might have to just play with it just a little bit to kind of get the shape that we want. And this looks pretty good here. Hit my check mark to accept. Control D to deselect. And let's go ahead and use this and bring it on over and see how our shapes are looking. So right now we have a pretty good start to our very start of our first pixel art map. And so when we come back next time, we're going to continue to work with this to kind of take us to the next level to see what kind of things we need to do to make our